we would like to thank the following sponsors. Poland, Osh India, Snorkel, Genie, JLE. Our association partners: Oshai, enhancing HSE and culture; Sarah, Construction Equipment Rental Association; and our media partner, WSHH, World of Safety and Health Media. We would also like to welcome ManLib, Sudhir, powering the future; iRise India.
Opportunity and for inviting me. I don't want to take up too much time because and I've got to dash to another meeting anyway. Just a quick overview, guys. As Jason just put up, we've had a substantial amount of MOOPs on the midfield terminal project that have been used. I'd like to say very successfully, and it's probably people on this call that have been associated with either supplying or providing training or equipment onto MTC with a large number of equipment that we've had here. Look, from a safety professional's point of view, we're always labelled as being the glass is half empty, and we're always looking for the additional improvement. What I want to start with is the success that what we've had. We're probably one of the first projects in the region to mandate the IPAF as a standard of training across the MOOPs and the equipment that we have here. That was done very successfully. As I said, I'd be surprised if there's not people on this conference which weren't involved in delivering that training. Overall, the standard of training that we received here from certain parties has been, again, I would label it as probably some of the industry standards across the Middle East region, and if not internationally. You know, we really have managed to get a high caliber of operators and run through a high caliber of training. Look, the parts that we would probably learn from, and the parts that I would probably like to share, is we have had examples of trainers come in, and this is not just on MTC, of trainers coming in and training parties selling IPAF as a standard of training, and probably coming away with concerns that the criteria behind IPAF is not really delivered. Someone just mute their mic there. So it's important. I mean, Jason and IPAF have taken many years to, number one, develop the training criteria. I think we're all duty bound to make sure that we follow that criteria. And if we are labeling ourselves as bodies and individuals and trainers that are delivering the IPAF training, then we probably have a responsibility to make sure that that training is following that IPAF criteria quite accurately. And what I mean is there's probably elements where we diverse and choose the parts of the IPAF training that we deliver. And is, you know, we don't want to be sucked into, as I said, we talk about responsibility. We don't want to get sucked into being a business orientated of how many people do you need IPAF trained? You need 20. Okay, this is how much it's going to cost, and we put people through that training. There has to be an element of, through the assessment process and the criteria that we give. I just want to run across just a couple of points. These are just a hit list, and I've only just sort of just scribbled these down. So most of these are not going to be new to anyone, but there's sort of points which I think are key items in the training we need to focus on and make sure that we're focusing on them. The first one is the type of equipment. Obviously, using equipment, have taken the time to before we delivering training to look at what usage the ME&SA is going to have. And the key elements for that then, is it going to be used outside? Is it a rough terrain? Is it suitable for the terrain that's going to be used? Are the ground conditions suitable for that type of ME&SA? Is the operator aware to be assessing these things? You know, it's all good doing the training in a closed environment, and then the real activities then are outside in you know, weather conditions, ground conditions, in ME&SA which aren't designed to be outside, that are taken outside. They're just some of the considerations. In and around steelwork and enclosed areas, obviously you guys are well conversed into the secondary guarding measures which are now available. You know, technology's moved on. We've certainly used a lot of secondary guarding on midfield terminal due to the amount of steelwork and areas we've had to go. And again, I'd like to say we've used it very successfully, you know. The next part I wanted to go on to is the emergency retrieval process from the ground. This was an area we were lacking. A good few years back, probably 2016, we realised that we didn't have the resources and arrangements around ground retrieval that we would probably be happy with. So again, great training operators, but if they're all engaged and up in elevated areas and we've got no one at ground level that can conduct a ground rescue, so it's something we want to be considering as well. The use of harnesses is always an interesting one for me. It probably the most confused item to train people out there, and safety professionals as well. Again, it comes down to the type of ME&SA, but we often see people wearing loose fitting harnesses, incorrectly attached to the basket rather than the designated anchor points. We see people using fall and arrest lanyards, which are longer reaching and not restraining into the basket. You know, preference always should be given to full restraint, and the reason being is they should be staying in the basket and not able to get out. And it is something common we see. Still, I'll be honest with you, and it's a lack of understanding. What else have I got? Just the familiarization training around the make and model, again, which I touched on, is something that you know, again, make sure that we're covering that criteria. And then the inspection, the pre-use inspection, which is another element which we get some really good operators, highly skilled and highly trained operators, but they lack in knowledge around what they should be checking. You know, if it takes a safety officer to be walking around to find that there's damaged parts to the equipment, or the beacon or the reversing siren or the warning beacon is not operating, then, you know, what are these operators doing again? And it could be from peer pressure from the supervisor, but quite often we find that guys are not assessing these before they're using them. And look, probably the last bit, because I've probably gone on a bit, and I promised Jason I'd only be 5 minutes, and I'm probably 10 now. The assessment process itself, I think this is probably the most critical element of your training, of going back and assessing how someone's competent. Look, I'm going to say it, we're all running businesses, but if we're charging for 10, 20 people to be put through IPAF training, and 10 and 20 people are qualifying every time, then I'm skeptical to ask, you know, what do people need? We must have different standards in those 10 or 20 people that we're assessing through the same coursework. And we're all different. We all absorb information and have different levels of ability. So I think that's a challenge to you all is what do we do from a personal standpoint in regards to how we assess these individuals as being competent? You know, and are we when we go into these scenarios put under pressure, and or do we go into these situations and say, well, look, this is the criteria I scored the competency assessment against, which is the IPAF criteria, and that's what I stick to. And if someone doesn't meet that criteria, then they need some further development and further training to be able to brought up to that standard. All right. That's about all I got. Jason, I think that's just a quick overlay for me. The last thing I wanted to finish on is MOOPs are a fantastic bit of equipment. They have probably been the most resourceful equipment that we've used on this project. To have 900 in any given time will give you an understanding. I think we were around 35,000 people on this project at that time. We've had very, very few incidents on MOOPs. And I don't have the figure of the working hours, but it would be in the hundreds of millions. We're currently about 450 million man hours on the project, so that would give you some sort of idea. And working at height in man lifts has been a substantial part in the early works. So the positive note is they're a great bit of kit. You guys involved in training, you know, you're duty bound, and you have a fantastic opportunity to give people the knowledge to operate these fantastic bits of kit safely. All right. Thanks, Jason. Thanks everyone.
Chris. Thank you very much.
We would like to thank the following sponsors: Poland, Osh India, Snorkel, Genie, JLG. Our association partners: Oshai, Enhancing HSE and Culture; Sarah, Construction Equipment Rental Association; and our media partner, WSHH, World of Safety and Health Asia. We would also like to welcome Man Lift, Sudhir, Powering the Future, iRise India. Hi everyone! Good afternoon and good morning to everyone. Welcome to another day of Indian National Safety Week. And today we're going to talk about more on operators' risk. So before we start, I would like to welcome, or I would like to call on Mr. Jason Woods, IPAF Regional Manager for Middle East and South Asia, to give us a word. Hi, Mr. Jason. Welcome back.
Hello, good morning, everyone, and good afternoon. Certainly a pleasure to be back on live stream again. I hope you're enjoying the week so far. We've certainly covered some good sessions. Day one covered knowledge from a safety practitioner's perspective, and certainly training. and then yesterday we moved into harnesses, an overview of harnesses, which young Hugh Maxwell came and joined us from the UK. As our goal is, we never stop promoting safety, and certainly, you know, these kind of platforms which we work on is certainly there to help us, even though we have restrictions of travel in some occasions. At least we're able to pinpoint some good safety discussions. Please keep all your questions coming in. Some very constructive questions arrived yesterday. So yes, please certainly, you know, keep them questions coming in. More the merrier. This is a time to ask questions and hopefully get the correct answers, what you're looking for. So certainly, you know, let's use this. We only have 2 days left, so let's use this as best as we can. Before we start, again, a big thank you to the team. Again, I know that we can't have these events without the team behind the scenes, so a big thank you very much. And certainly the sponsors, supporters, and IPAF members. We all share the same goal, and we all walk the same path of trying to reduce the potential risk of incidents. So I will get started. In terms of today's session, today is a follow-on through where Chris has just spoken about the case study of a project which he was managing in the Middle East. As you've seen from the discussion, what Chris was chatting about, that, you know, they were a very large MEOP user on the project through the duration. You can play the video now, Ali, that's fine. Yeah, they were a very large MEOP user, 900 pieces of equipment, different shapes and sizes, different phases, from steel going into MEP works, you know, some spider lifts towards the finishing. And you can appreciate, you know, to manage this kind of equipment, having all the safety aspects put in place from the day the equipment arrives to how we control it through the project. Naturally, you know, 900 pieces of equipment, you're looking at thousands of operators, and as Chris mentioned, 35,000 contractors on site at the peak, with around probably, I think we had more than 150 different nationalities there. So you can imagine, you know, the kind of workforce which we're dealing with. So yeah, obviously our focus today is more towards the operator, because it's kind of a chicken and egg situation where we always emphasize the employer's responsibilities to surely train the staff, train the workforce, but surely there has to be a turning point, and the turning point becomes when an operator is now being trained, he's on his project, he's got his equipment, and all of a sudden now he has to work. And you know, regardless whether the machine is rented with an operator, as this is quite the case in India, or whether it's a workman, a tradesman from the contractor who's actually going to operate the equipment. So regardless who the operator is, I think that now we should start identifying you know, the procedure from the operator and see where the operator's risks can occur. Now, obviously, that operator risks is quite a big topic, and so I'm only going to step into 3 key areas today. And as you'll see through the presentation, that we will focus on probably the most highlighted ones. Ali, if you can just switch to the next slide for us. So as you can see on the video, which was just showing, it's just a typical construction site. It's nothing out of the norm, but you can see the activity, hopefully that you've picked it up, where the operator was generally at the ground and raising the platform into position. We had a hazard above where steel work was being positioned from the crane. And then if you look very closely, you would have noticed that one of the passengers had actually climbed out, which, as you can see from my slide now, creates the real tipping point of operator risk. So as I mentioned, let's focus on the operator. Let's see, now we've done the training. The guy's certainly competent in enough to get on that project. What do we find? So falling out of the platform is still a high risk. We still see it. We see it in a term that the operator positions the platform where he's not quite in the right zone and the right work area, so he can't quite reach. So he's got more of a tendency then to climb and step up. So some only need to step up onto the mid rail, or unfortunately some go to the top of the handrail, which then increases the risk of that fall. So I think for that point there, we should be thinking of platform positioning more than anything, and depending what type of platform we're using, then that would indicate then of how I would set the machine up. Bearing in mind that the employer's already trained the operator, so we shouldn't really be having these discussions, but unfortunately we still come across this. Entrapment, that means that when somebody is going to get crushed, it means that they could be at height and they could be in a serious position. So that's another one which we will discuss in a sec. I will touch on mute tip over, because another one, this is another highlights, and again, especially in India, and also not understanding the decals or safety information. Even though, regardless, when you rent a machine, the rental company will come and give you a familiarization. Sometimes either the operator still don't understand the familiarization and he's still not confident, or you may find it the second shift might not even be familiarized. So there's a monopoly of errors here which could come towards that operator risk, and I think that we should take these factors into consideration. Ali, if you can just go to the next slide for us. So again, some images, very basic images, typical worker working on a project. Are we doing anything wrong? Probably to the naked eye, you're going to say no. But if you look very closely, I see a harness connected to a top handrail, which probably means that it's not going to support that operator and keep him in that restrained position. It's going to be the carabiner around the handrail, so that would allow the operator to move then and to walk around the platform quite freely. We've seen some platforms yesterday where we can increase the size of the platform. So as I say, as operators, we still have a rule, and we're obliged to make sure we're working safely. So Ali, if you can go to the next slide for us. So again, just a very straightforward, typical application on a boom lift. If I'm a steel erector, I need to position my platform in amongst confined space at height. And this is where it gets slightly challenging for the operator, because now it's not just about the drive positioning, it's now my lifting element. I need to understand the correct sequence of lift to get to the comfort zone for the operator. Remember, once we're at height at these positions, we should have the ability as an operator to work quite safely. And this is where the focus comes back to the operator and making sure the operator is actually trained and certainly passed his assessments and exams, whether they're theory or practical. Okay, Ali, let's go to the next slide. So I'm going to stay with entrapment, and I'm going to, but before I get to the next section, what I'm going to focus on is, when did the risks appear with people getting stuck at height, let's just call it. So as you can see on the slide, 2005, manufacturers and working committees and government entities has been working on control panels for a very, very long time, and they're still working on working groups working on the correct positioning of platforms and how we can reduce the risk of entrapment, for an example. So back in 2005, you'll see through the next slides that there was a bit of focus going on the control panel. Now, as you can see, Ali, sorry, can you go back one slide a minute? As you can see on this slide, then this is a platform control. So if I take away the blue handrail, in this case, that would mean I got full access then as an operator to these controls. So that means that if I was to lean forward as an operator, I could potentially control a control lever in that platform, which I don't actually would like to control. So maybe I'm working in a confined space and perhaps that it's very close to the steel work. And if I'm not careful and if I'm not observing my movement, then I got a potential risk of an incident, meaning an entrapment. So as you can see, that manufacturers back in 2005 started to put an emphasis on the control panel and raising like a protector, a guard around the controls, which would then surely minimize the risk of an operator connecting with the incorrect control. Okay, Ali, sorry, if we can go forward again now. So it didn't always just stay at a barrier around the controls. On the left side, you can see a trigger. So that would mean that if I needed to move, let's say for an example, my scissor lift, I would have to push the trigger in, and then I'm able then to control that direction, then either pushing forwards or backwards. In the middle, we'll see the old traditional foot pedal. So that would mean that as an operator, I would need to push my foot on the pedal, then I would be able to function the controls. And on the right side, you'll see a little green button on the side. That means I physically have to press that button in, and again, I can function then the features on my control, whether I want to drive or lift. But you can see that the research started a very long time ago of trying to reduce the risk of operators whilst we're elevated and working in confined space. So if we go to the next slide, Ali. So from a legal perspective, you can see that, you know, whether we talk about ANSI standards or EN 280 standards, ISO standards, again, you know, a lot of work in the early days was starting to be prepared. We'll call them white paper documents, but you can see that there's a chain of command, and this is our starting point. So at the very beginning, we listen to the audience. The audience is naturally the ME&SA operators. We research. As IPAF, we have a department, a technical department, which we do a lot of research, and we take in indicators of trend analysis of incidents, and then we push it through as a norm then into work groups, which then moves into working with standard bodies and filtering it down. As far as manufacturers. If you can go to the next slide, Ali. So this is an example of a Genie bulletin, a safety bulletin to just alert that's, you know, the guarded area, the primary guards on a ME&SA platform is certainly at this dimension. So this is, like I say, just an example of a safety bulletin which would go out. Now keep tuned for tomorrow's talk, because we're going to talk about the voice from manufacturers out to the industry, and this is something which we're going to elaborate on in a little bit more depth with the guys. So Ali, if you can go on for the next slide. So incidents have not it's not new. Incidents have been out there for a very long time. If you imagine, you know, ME&SA incidents, all incidents, we can only analyze what we see. So reporting of accidents is very important. It does a number of things. It helps us grow safety standards, and it helps us develop training programs, and it helps us develop technical documents. Unfortunately, you get into a position where you're proactive to a certain level. However, you know, there is again that tipping point. And if I use the IPAF technical team for an example, you know, these guys are working very hard behind the scenes of development, and we will get to the point where we're ahead of the game, and it's certainly being a proactive position. Okay, Ali, if you can go forward on the next slide. So we have to focus on the gaps, and if you think of risk of entrapment, you know, naturally there is a number of areas of risk of entrapment. I'm not going to read them all from the slide, but human error has to be quite high up there. Lone worker could be there. Management factors, maybe we haven't carried out the risk assessment correctly. Condition of ME&SA, we're going to talk about this in a lot more depth tomorrow. I know that Suma Ray at Hulet is certainly going to highlight a few key areas. But as you can see, just from identifying key areas and understanding crucial gaps, I think that they all can be managed as long as we put our process into position correctly. Ali, if you can just jump forward. So let's talk about the development of the products now. And some of these names have already been mentioned earlier on. Secondary guard-in was one. I know Chris spoke about this on his earlier presentation. But secondary guard-in has been developed in such a fashion that it's there to either alert the operative or it's going to totally protect the operative. So there's generally two different types of guard-in systems. Now, let's not ever take away that operator must be trained and competent. And like we've already spoke about training, surely there's a level of acceptable training. And if I'm going to be assessed as a trainee, then naturally that's going to allow Jason, as it is, then to move the platform into position correctly and certainly move into an area safely, because I'm always going to observe. However, there's nothing stopping us from having additional. So as you can see on the left side, this is one example which has been out for a while, 2013. It's an electronic version. So what will happen is if I put myself in a trapped position, then something is going to alert me as an operator. It's going to give me an alarm, and then I have to act fairly quickly then. With these designs, that as an electronic version, that the machine will cut out. On some versions, you'll find that it will actually reduce the height by a few millimeters also. So it'll take any pressure points away from the operative if he's in that stuck position. On the right side, you'll see a physical, some people call it a cage, but ideally it's a guard. It falls under the category of sanctuary zone. So what that means is that if I'm going near a obstruction at height, that it's the cage or the guard, the sanctuary zone, which would actually make contact with the object, not the person. So you can see, that there's we call it secondary guarding, or anti-entrapment is another word for it. But the idea is to protect the operator whilst he's at height. If we can go further, Ali. Yeah, and again, you can see different manufacturers which are coming in with different fashions and different guarding devices. You'll notice on this handrail that there's an inner handrail as well, and that is to reduce the nipping. So if I'm raising the platform near, let's call it the working edge, maybe of a building, naturally a worker will have his hands over the handrail. Now we're encouraging them to have their hands positioned on the inner handrail. Again, it falls under the secondary guarding kind of. So Ali, if we go again. So again, I'm just going to give you indicators of what is available on the market. We do have secondary guarding systems in India, and I would really echo that if you feel your project needs this, then please talk to the rental companies and certainly make sure the manufacturers are involved at this point, because there is equipment available. But let's not take away, we must never forget about the operator. If he's when he's trained correctly, he has a responsibility of moving that platform safely. So his eyes and ears is a massive help for that, and observation of platform movement is massive. Okay, Ali, if we go again. So yeah, this device is an electronic device. If the body was going to become in a trapped position, it would naturally push the body forward. And once the body connects then with the yellow indicator in front of you, the buzz bar, the machine then would cut out. So this is just to give you an overview of where the development has been. So primary guarding was in the very early days, and then we moved out then into the secondary guarding, anti-entrapment and sanctuary zones. Okay, Ali, let's go again. And just a few more. Left side, you can see that there's sanctuary guarding systems here, a physical cage, which again, it protects then the workforce if they have the need to work within a confined space. Now, On the right side, you'll see that this is one of our training centers in North India. And you'll notice, if you look carefully, that the person in the platform, part of his training, his duty is to position that platform through the confined space, as we'll call it, creating a gap. And that's what I'm looking for. Okay, Ali, and again. So a typical example of a very short video clip. The video clip is going to indicate on how an operator would move a platform into position. There's nothing unusual about this, but you can see from the video clip, once it starts, that the observation of the operator, again, is quite a massive important role here. We do embed these videos into our training programs, and if it's an instructor-led course, the instructor will play the video as he's running through the session with the students. And what he will do then, if it's an e-learning module, then it's already embedded into the e-learning program. So as I say, you know, there's nothing unusual about this. We're working on a construction site. We're in a steel frame process. Maybe the roof is going on in this case, and we have a standard boom lift, or cherry picker as we call it, earlier on in the week from Mr. Josie John. But you can see where my focus is that operator, and ideally I need to make sure that he's safe at all time. This is what we must avoid. This is what we call entrapment. When we get to this position, then the alarms need to be triggered, and certainly the rescue team needs to be in position, ready to get this guy down safely. As you can see, by turning his body, using his direction of lift and his eyes, surely now he's putting himself in a safe zone. And this goes back to training, and you know, certainly training the operators, whether they arrive with the machine from the rental company, or whether we're dealing with the workforce, which is quite the norm, is trained. We must make sure that they're trained to the adequate level. I'm very pleased to announce that we have 5 training centers in India, and the pace is certainly picking up. And we do work quite hard with the instructors. We take them through a lot of professional development, where we'll run CPD with these guys. So we're always adding tools into the instructor's toolbox to teach. And we don't just come to audit the center, we actually come and help them of developing tools for helping the students. Ali, if you can go to the next slide, that's good. And again, you know, another typical training center of ours in India. What should training look like? And you can see, you know, we should mix it. And the mix bag is certainly theory session, group discussions. We call it recap. So after each chapter of training, we would expect then a group discussion to cover the chapter which we've just discussed. So every student is always involved. We have assessments, so the assessments falls into tests. Naturally, everybody needs to take a break, and we're human beings. We can't keep teaching forever. The good thing about the IPAF training programs is the content of the training material is up to date. We have around 90%, maybe more now, 95% even, support from manufacturers who are actually members of IPAF. Part of the training is familiarization. If we have students who's not quite familiar with the controls, then rather going straight to assessment and tests, the instructor then will step them through a familiarization program. It might take half a day, or it could even take 1 hour. It depends on the ability of the students. And again, we move into tests. And once we get to test, then we have to make sure that the operators are competent. Because what we would like to do is to give them back, when they come to arrive at the project, they need to come back confident. And when you see their qualification, surely what we're looking at this point is that they're competent to work safely on site for you guys at the project. Because remember, we're stepping it away now from employers' responsibilities, and we're heading now straight to operator responsibilities. Okay, Ali, if we can just jump forward. Training is always continuing. Innovations is certainly out there. virtual reality training. As IPAF, we've been working very hard with a few of the VR manufacturing companies and providers. And I'm pleased to announce that, IPAF has accepted some VR programs to be part of the IPAF program. And I don't think you're too far away from having VR units also to support your training in India, which is fantastic news. The moment that we can help contractors, operators, support employers and employers' responsibilities and whatever white paper documents you have on site, we need to make sure that that person is confident. And by adding more and more tools into the instructor's toolbox, then surely everybody is a winner around the table. The important thing is, let's pass the students, but let's pass them after they've passed their assessments from theory and practical. Okay, Ali, let's go. I see Mr. Stephen Story coming online, which is quite worrying. Okay, so other safety innovations, and this is quite new. And again, it falls under the remit of secondary guarding, and it helps the operator a little bit more than less. So, Ali, if you can just jump to the next slide. It's a very short.
Halo is a safety awareness device that alerts the user when there is a risk of unintentional contact or overhead entrapment whilst operating a ME&SA mobile elevated work platform. The Halo attachment is worn by the user rather than a device fitted to the ME&SA. Halo attaches to a specific safety helmet and doesn't rely on the ME&SA having an additional device fitted. In 2016, there were 66 reported fatalities involving ME&SAS worldwide. The main causes were falls from height, entrapment, electrocution, and overturn of machinery. Entrapment accounted for 18% of reported fatalities in 2016. Worryingly, this is trending upwards from 16% in 2015. There are currently over 1.5 million ME&SAS in rental fleets across the world, with less than 5% of these having entrapment contact alerts. The Halo is less than 10% of the cost to install an alert device on a ME&SA currently. The Halo device can be used on any ME&SAS, from large boom lifts, scissor platforms, even on low-level access platforms. Halo is the cost-effective attachment that allows all ME&SA operators to reduce the risk of unintentional contact when working at height. Halo, it's on you.
So yeah, as you can see from the platform perspective, that platform controls, designs, it's all changed over the last few years. Back to 2005, we were still gathering data for accident research and focusing on that entrapment area. And again, once we find or capture the data, then through the IPAF technical department, it certainly helps to support industry and let it grow. And a lot of these manufacturers are also part of the technical work group, which then naturally flows through to standards. So great stuff. Ali, if you can go to the next slide for us. So yeah, when we look at incidents in terms of working with entrapment, there is a figure on the last report of around 20% of incidents were still in and around the operators being trapped. So I think, let's really focus on where we're working and what height, what platform position, because we need to kind of reduce this figure. There are good training programs out there in the field, and there are certainly some good initiatives from manufacturers. And also, as you've seen then, the Halo, which is the newer version then of secondary guarding. I've just added some bulletin points where where I feel we're still seeing entrapment coming in. So certainly lack of training. A 20-minute talk around an elevated work platform is not classed as sufficient training. Operator error is still out there. Poor platform positioning. It's where the operator can't read his height and his horizontal reach, for an example. Weather conditions can be distracting. Other tradesmen, workers in the area, mechanical failure, and obviously there's a lot more to focus on. Generally, when an accident happens, it's never always one area. It's a monopoly of areas which falls into that incident. So just something for you safety professionals to certainly be alert of and be aware. Ali, if you can go to the next slide. So I hope that has given you a good overview of entrapment and understand, what's available out there. So now I'm just going to have a few slides now on two other areas which I feel is quite important, and especially in the Indian market. Machine tip over. Machine tip over is not new in the region. We do have reports of machines tipping. Can it be avoided? Of course. We need to do a few things first. Training from the HSE department right down to the operator is massive. Making sure that the machines are fit for purpose and they're in very good condition, meaning that they're able to be operated correctly. And again, back to that training page that makes sure the operator totally understands his work zone. And that doesn't mean just from where he's elevated. I'm now talking about the ground area. Ali, if you can just push it to the next video for us. So this video clip is not new. It's been out for a long time. It's a live stream video which happened in Nottingham in the UK back in 2007. This was caught on CCTV on one of the major contracting sites in the city centre. And as you can see, there's ongoing traffic. There's people walking by. So it's a typical city in the UK where it has a construction site. Unfortunately, it got to a point where the machine took a fall. The machine had a tip over at the point of being elevated whilst having operators in the platform. So we will have more and more discussions like this of certain areas, and I will elaborate on machine tip over at a later date, which I'll send you the invites out. And like I say, we will have a main focus on tip over, but today is to just give us an overview of what we should be alert of. So in my eyes, the first step here would be certainly we have to focus on the HSE department and the employer, the contractor, because first of all, we need to know what machines are being used and where. Then what we should be doing is focusing on the operator. Once we put all these steps in place, the training's been done for that operator. Surely my next step as an operator is to walk the route, to understand where I'm going to be driving that machine at height. As you can see, that this operator was working at a high level. So in that sense, that he should be very familiar of what's at the ground, because once his wheels are now starting to drive into the hazard area and the risk, as you've seen, surely that's too late then. As a trained operator, and again, I'll relate back to the training courses which the students would cover on a standard IPAF course. They walk the route. They are taught on how to walk the route and understand the weight bearing of the machine and movement of platform. So that then indicates that once we are on a real site, surely then we're going to be confident enough to understand then, is this machine too much? And if there's a drain or a manhole, then surely we should be telling the HSE guys that we should not be driving in this position. So as I say, I will open up another session purely on ground conditions, because again, it's certainly it's a massive topic on its own. So Ali, if you can go to the next slide for us. The next one which I would like to highlight, and this is a real issue in a lot of regions, is well, there's a few areas here of concern. So if we talk about decals, meaning the identification stickers on machines, we use the terminology of tampering with machines. Now, if you can't read the decals on a unit because maybe they're covered in paint or they're peeled off, that is actually falls under the umbrella of tampering with the machine. You see, we have a divide of decals, and some decals are there to give you warnings, so they could be a hazard decal, could be something like a safe working load decal saying, hey guys, we're going to have 250 kgs in the platform. Perhaps it's an extra capacity platform, so that means that yes, we can put more weight in the platform, but however, if we're going to lift at a certain height of outreach and horizontal reach, potentially then we might have to reduce the weight in the platform. So when you take these factors into consideration, that decal is a massive importance for me as an operator, because it's quite risky if I get it wrong. So as I mentioned earlier, you know, decals, we shouldn't avoid it. They should be clear. They should be able to be read. If you follow the operator's manual, there will be pages indicating of positioning of decals. So perhaps when you receive your machine from the rental company or certainly from a second-hand piece of equipment, which we'll talk about tomorrow, we should really identify, are all the decals in place, are they intact, and can we read them? And if the answers are coming back to me as no, then certainly we need to go back to the supplier or the dealer for that manufacturer in this case, and put some orders in, because naturally this should be part of your familiarization as an operator. So yeah, very, very important decals. And again, I will look at opening a session on decals to give HSE professionals a bit more of an overview of what decals look like and what they actually mean. So yeah, Ali, if you can take us to the next slide. As you can imagine, decals, safety indicators, hazards, information, they're there for a purpose to help you as a HSE guy, as an operator, certainly to reduce the risk of potential accidents. And I can't echo this enough. If it's not there, let's fix it. It's very easy. It's minimal cost, but it could certainly, you know, have the save or save us from having a potential accident further down the field. And don't forget, when a machine is being delivered, it's the duty of the delivery person to run through the decals with the operator or the operator team, so that the operators then have a full knowledge of you know, where is the emergency descent, what is the safe working load, and where can I find the weight of the machine and the wind speed and so on. So we will talk a lot more depth tomorrow about a voice from the manufacturers. So we have 3 good manufacturers joining us, Hewlett, Genie, and JLG, will be across on virtual TV. So it's certainly going to be a good discussion with these guys. I know them all personally, and we do a lot of work together. And like I say, that they're very safety orientated, and they want the same as us. They want people to be safe, because we all believe that ME&SA at height are most likely the safest tool that an operator can use. You know, we have emergency descent. What does that really mean? It means that if I'm at a risk position, then somebody can rescue me from the ground, and that's perfect. That keeps the body safe. Okay, so I think that's the end of my presentation today. Sorry, one more slide, maybe 2. Just some takeaways and responsibilities back to my friend, the operator. I've listed a 1 to 9 sequence. So platform size, the operator must always understand the platform size and limitations. The safe working load, it may differ Perhaps he's used to using a machine which is, let's call it blue. Now he's on a yellow or an orange one or a red one. Perhaps that the safe working load may change. That decal is my key indicator. We spoke about safety harnesses yesterday. Let's get it right, guys. It's very easy. You know, we don't have to complicate things. The platform controls, so I'm going to focus on the toggles. Again, they should be listed with a good decal, which I can read. I should be aware of platform movement, so no sudden movement from that control panel. You know, as a trained operator, I have a responsibility of positioning that platform correctly. Access and egress, making sure I'm climbing in and out of that platform correctly. I observe the handrail, and I'm back to decals, which is my friend, and certainly work equipment. You know, if I'm going to be using tools in that platform, we haven't even discussed dropped items. Again, it's another topic on its own. There are tools available through industry, but again, as a contractor, a project, a HSE, you know, we have a duty to minimize dropped items, and then as an operator, we have a duty to observe the dropped items and minimize these risks, whether we call it safety netting or whether we call it add-ons to the platform. But we must remember that we have to get any modifications to a platform certainly approved, and we can't just assume that our modification is sufficient. So again, that's a real big key topic, and I don't mind opening up individual sessions for these. So Ali, if we can just jump to the next slide. So one final, I know this is my final slide because I remember this one now. So one final slide, you know, let's focus on what your risk elements are. And as you can see, you know, there can be more. Of course, there can be more, but there's certainly a lot. Starting at the very beginning, our project needs to put in place as a standard requirement. Josie John spoke earlier on, if you recall, that, you know, we have a duty to have our self-law. You know, if we don't feel it's right, then we shouldn't be doing it. And certainly making sure that there's enough information out there. Training is massive for individuals, and let's make sure that we have the operators competent. Let's come away from operating the machine at ground, because that's a non-starter. Really, the ground controls are there simply for function checking and emergency descent, rescuing that operative. So let's keep that very clear. You know, let's come away from that, and I think that that's one good positive step then, which comes out of this week of India Safety Week. You know, we are here to help safety professionals, and we are here to try and help you know, projects stay in that safety zone. Okay, thank you very much, Ali. I think that's that is our last slide. Thank you. I hope that it was beneficial for you guys.
Hi. So we
I think I've got away quite lightly. It's either that or their internet connection has gone.
people are being too easy on you.
Yeah, I do see one comment from our friend Stephen Story. Yeah, sure. I spoke to Stephen some few days back actually, and yeah, Steve, we'll certainly talk offline, and we'll certainly look at setting something up for you in Israel. And I look forward to the journey, and certainly a good catch up again.
All right, so we have a big question now. You've not got away easy. From Tarun Tiwari. There are certain situations when operators are fully trained. He understands the safety info very well. Still, the accidents happen due to some external factors like deliberate mistakes from client end. Specifically in rentals, casual safety measures on site, our operator, our machine staked, how to control.
I think that just pulling out takeaways from your question here. So first of all, I think that we must focus on, accidents are not really set out that it's done intentionally. So sometimes accidents do happen, and sometimes they are out of our reach. But there's a lot of factors that we can put in place before this, and I think that a lot of projects in India, we're not at that tipping point yet where we can put these practices in place. I think the first step is to look at the users and the management team. So if the management team needs help with understanding the products called ME equipment, then let's take them through a ME&SA for Managers course. It will help them understand that management element. Let's question the operator at the moment. Is he trained? I know you mentioned that they're trained fully, but I would step back and question this then. We need to have proof of this. Ideally, I'd be pushing towards an IPAF qualification, knowing what's involved in the content and also knowing the level of knowledge of our teachers. The teachers go through extreme training themselves to become an instructor. So, there are incidents and we can't get away from that. Sometimes they're out of our hands, but I think that we need to just step back. And when we use the word operators are already trained and competent, there's a difference. You must remember that a lot of the workforce, especially in India, we come from different provinces and we have different cultures and we have different views of life, if that makes sense, and experiences, and you don't know what sort of pressures are behind the scenes with that individual as an operator. So I think continuation of training never stops, but let's get that starting point right first. I think very, very important. Thank you.
Okay, so the next one is not a question actually, it's just from Vanil Babu. He says details such as design of controls, skyguard, active shield, the halo helmet, etc. were definitely new information for me. Thank you, Mr. Jason.
Good stuff. As you can see that the industry is developing at some pace, and I think that secondary guarding is not new. Primary guarding is not new. That, as you can see from the slides, that it actually came out a very long time ago, back prior to 2005. Incidents that they are out there, but you can see how the industry is listening to the trend analysis of incidents happening, and we're trying to develop additional safety features then for machines. We must never take away that the platform is a platform mind. I think that's very important. But we must enjoy what manufacturers are doing this day and age to help and support operatives a lot closer, certainly when we get into confined space, because that does take a skilled hand to move a platform 180 feet up in the elevated, with a gap of maybe 4 inches either side. So, we really should take these factors into consideration.
Okay, so we don't have any more questions.
Perfect.
Jason, you've got them very easy.
Excellent. Good day. No, thank you very much. And so yeah, I really hope that today's session was constructive for you, and I hope that you picked up some good bulletin points. Don't forget that we will be sending the IPAF ME&SA for Managers e-learning link to every attendee. So please enjoy it. I'm sure you're going to have some fun. It's very interactive. Don't think you're going to be just sat on your chair going through a standard e-learning module. Not at all. The e-learning module is designed in such a fashion, it's going to quiz you. It's going to ask you questions and you need to make answers. At the end of it, it won't give you a quiz, it'll give you a test. And this will test your ability of knowledge. So let's do it. Let's get this out there, and let's give you guys the knowledge and expertise then of more tools in your portfolio then as safety people. And let's support the manufacturers. Let's ask more questions. Let's ask more questions to rental companies. Our goal is to certainly have a safer India and certainly help contractors work safely, reduce the risks, and give you guys much more tools in your toolbox as a safety practitioner. So we will be in touch, and we have one more session running tomorrow, which I'm really excited for. We have 3 manufacturers joining us. They're very well experienced, and between us all, we have more than a decade, much more than decades experience in the fields. In fact, I'm probably going to pitch it around 120 years experience around the table tomorrow, but I'm not going to tell you who's the oldest. So yeah, please come and join us, and please have your questions ready for manufacturers, because they're here for your service tomorrow. So very good. And just to finish this off today, a big thank you again to the team behind the scenes, absolutely superb. I know, including myself, the last 4 or 5 days has been massive. And I think that we're getting somewhere, and we're certainly seeing a very large audience joining the session. So a big thank you very much. And again, our supporters, sponsors, people who believe in what we're doing, and I think that we can't do this alone. It's a very big walkway, and we just need to all work together, I think. So again, let's finish tomorrow with a good session. 45 minutes of your time, and let's enjoy it. Keep your questions though for the manufacturers. Let's give them a good session. So thank you very much, and we will close today.
We would like to thank the following sponsors: Poland, Osh India, Snorkel, Genie, JLE. Our association partners: Oshai, enhancing HSE and culture; Sarah, Construction Equipment Rental Association; and our media partner, WSHH, World of Safety and Health Media. We would also like to welcome ManLib, Sudhir, powering the future; iRise India,